Welcome to the Innovators Club for Women webinar channel, where innovation meets inspiration. I am the CEO and founder, Katie Cupstis.
Switch it back over to Hamp.
Thanks, Mitch. One thing too, to kind of make the bridge where Mitch was with the product about why it's so important to understand how people use it. A lot of founders fall into the trap that a potential customer comes to them and said, well, if the product did this, I would buy it. Or if it came in this style or whatever. So you pivot, you take your attention away, and you want to satisfy one particular client's, let's call it unique ask, as opposed to figuring out how people want to buy the base component or whatever it is. In the world that I was in for many years in SaaS, is that's a roadmap question, not something that we would address in a sales presentation. What we have is what we have. What we're going to do is what we're going to do, but right now this is what we're solving. So if you think about this, it's like a game plan. So again, whether you're a consumer packaged goods founder or you're a SaaS somewhere in the middle with tech, et cetera, med device, whatever, is think about the industry sectors that make the most sense. What's the function of this in those sectors? And who is it would be the ideal advocate? Because anytime you're going to sell something like this, you need an executive sponsor. Or in the case of consumer packaged goods, you're going to need a distribution company that says this fits a nice niche for who we sell to. We have customers that would like this. Let me go do this. And then once you do that, you want to say, okay, what kind of company can I deal with at this early stage that I can work with? As Mitch said, you get their opinions back. You want to create advisor committees using your clients to give you the best intelligence possible. And you know what? It doesn't cost you anything to get that information back from your customers. Very, very smart way to do this. And then as you start to identify the base, then you want to diversify into, well, who else would want this solution? How else can I do this? Quick story anecdotally. I was in the aesthetic marketing space for quite a while with one of the companies. And I got to know the whole backstory about the product Botox. As many people know, it was originally patented and invented to help with migraines because it freezes the nerve in the back of your neck. And that's how they used it for a number of years. It was one particular doctor that they actually used it on their significant other and found that it also worked for, let's call it, aging of facial components, if you will, and wrinkles. And thus the whole aesthetic industry was born by accident because Botox was never intended for that. That's not what it was, but look what's happened. So that's what I'm saying, that market diversification, is important. And then when you look at the model, if I go to sell somebody or I sell this in the consumer, what's the price point? Not based on make it as cheap as possible. What is the margin I can operate on and still keep thriving? Because what you want to do early stage, if you're a consumer packaged goods company, is you're repurposing the margin you're making to get inventory, to go into manufacturing, to do your marketing, improve your website. And that's really important. And then the mixture that comes in with starting, scaling, and mature, the starting part is like Mitch said, what's the mystery of my customers and what do they buy and how often do they buy? And what is it they're going to make repeat customers? And that's what investors also look at is if somebody bought something from you, how would it be that they come back and buy it again? If you look at Amazon, everybody on this call buys stuff from Amazon, I'm sure, every week, and they track it. So if you're a young mom with a newborn and you're buying diapers and wipes and other things, guess what? They're tracking that data to say, oh, here's a mom that's doing this. We're going to start marketing to them this way. It's no different if you're doing consumer packaged goods or a product solution or a tech solution. It's the same way. And then in terms of the backing, I, again, not speaking for Amy and Mitch, but I'll just say I implore every founder on this call to go as long as you can, bootstrap as long as you can, and protect yourself from people that are going to take advantage, especially if you've gotten a little bit of scale and you know you got a tiger by the tail. don't give away your company. Do everything you possibly can to make it happen, because I've seen too many situations where people go, yeah, ended up with 30%, and they ended up firing me 2 years later, and then they ended up selling the company to a bigger competitor and they got aced. It happens a lot, and we go from there. Mitch. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is that a lot of founders make the mistake of chasing the biggest logo if it's in a business to business situation in their industry sector. Big mistake. Two reasons. One, big companies love ideas for free, and they will soak up all the information from you, and then they'll end up reverse engineering and doing it themselves. Or two, they'll string you along with proof of concepts, and you're not making any money. And the sales cycle is sometimes 5 quarters. So that's not the way to go. You want to look at how many customers can I add per month? What's the annual revenue I'm getting per customer? What's my margin? Because these metrics, as Amy will say later on, these metrics are the chemistry, how the investors look at what you're doing. All right. Not how much you smile, not how much you know your product, not how much you're affable, and et cetera. They want to look at the chemistry of your business. This is the DNA of what you got to show to investors. So what you're doing is also, if you add 15 customers in a quarter, are you losing any? Are you gaining? Are you net positive? Are you selling the same customers more of the same? Because guess what? If I have a customer that buys a product one from me and they hit my website and they come back and buy product number two, my cost of acquisition for that sale is about 10%. If I have to go out and get a new customer, it's about 75%. So which one of those would you rather have? And then you also got to be mindful as a startup about a dominant player in whatever segment you're involved in, because they're the big bad wolf, and they are for a reason. You want to stay clear for them as long as you possibly can. Do not poke the bear, right? You want to operate on your own mechanics for a long time before you poke the bear. Mitch?
So summarizing kind of both what Hamp was saying in the last slide, and even just this kind of even takes us back to where we were, which is what really gets the wheels going and you start seeing sales more consistently. And when you're in the middle of these diagrams, the same problem, same solution, people buying it's the same, and you know how to sell to these people or this group, and then you try to expand to find another segment that's the same thing, same problem, same solution, same buyer, because you might have to shift how you present, or if you're going after a different sector or a different type of consumer profile, you market to message that, but essentially you're trying to find the same dynamic. And that is a real ideal target market. And that's the one you want to be able to show with proof versus like, obviously if I'm showing a woman's bra, whatever, it's women, and you need to show by actually going in deeper and showing, well, this is why it's the same. We're solving the same problem with the same solution, and here's how we're getting them, and this is how they buy. Because not everyone's going to be the same segment. And they're gonna zero in on that very, very quickly, regardless of what B2B, B2C, whatever kind of product. And as soon as you can do this, they just like, oh, great. Like this seems like you can, and you're already probably showing that it's repeatable. And then this is how you think about every segment. And then that bubbles up to different, target markets, et cetera. So just wanted to hammer that home, which is why I put it. And it just makes it easier because the whole team is aligned. It makes it very easy to put collateral together, put metrics together, identify things, and you're not chasing too many things when you start thinking with this framework. And then hand it off to Amy.
So again, we go back to being scalable. So if you are scalable, then you are investable. That means your strategy is working. You have a clear vision. You have scalable processes, meaning you can duplicate it. You have sales processes in place. You can hire people and hire salespeople, and they know what they're doing because you've set the wheels in motion. And the number one thing is, again, it's focusing on customer acquisition and retention. And as Hamp said, you know, you want to have those repeat customers because it's going to take less money and less time to bring them back in. And as long as you are gaining customers, keeping customers, you can grow your team. And as you grow your team, you want to make sure that you're growing it to a point that makes sense, that isn't too fast, too quickly, too big, and then you're screwed. You don't want to not hire enough. You want to make sure that as you are scaling, you're following, you know, your strategy that you set out at the very beginning, because investors are going to want to know, like, okay, you had a solid plan and you followed it through, and now you're growing, you were scalable. Let's talk about being able to, you know, let's talk investment. Go ahead to the next slide, Mitch, because oh, this
You.
one's not me.
I can do it.
I'm like, this isn't on my list.
So this goes to my very beginning. Your first ideal target, I mean, consumer products, you probably put a lot more time and effort thinking about who this is. In business to business, it's usually it's a learning process to validate who your real first ideal customer is. Especially if you're doing software or something where you know you're gonna have to continually be iterating and improving on the product. For those types of companies, you definitely are gonna have your ideal customer is gonna change significantly, most likely, before you get a validated target. That's one, like we know those three, the Venn diagram. We know the same problem, same solution, and the same buying behavior, and it might take a minute. But your first target, you know, and you might iterate because you need to layer on top. You start just building on, you find one, and then you find another, and they're very similar. They can almost be like, oh, it's the same. But once you get nuance and you realize either the buying behavior, there will be different things that will make these segments split into different buckets. You know, over time, you might be like, well, it's generically a certain type of company or a certain type of industry. We get that, but you have to be very nuanced in the beginning. So we're trying to tell you, like, that might not be the most ideal customer in your mind when you started the business, is all I'm trying to say. And then you need to validate that and get to the one that you can really validate. And that's where you're kind of always, my product, does it fit the market? Is that market appealing enough? Can we sell consistently? Is it a shrinking market? Like all those other things, these factors, sometimes it's very much a discovery, even on the consumer side. And so you have to be ready to iterate or be able to talk to it and be able to tell the, you know, investors and or your team, these are the assumptions we're making. These are the hypotheses that we're doing, and we're just trying to validate and invalidate things as fast as possible. The other thing that I notice that folks don't spend as much time on is really understanding what actually triggered the purchase, because it's generically, you might find what the pains, the needs, the outcomes they were looking for, you know, and the timing of when they buy something. But you should always do win-loss interviews if you can, or if you're doing consumer research, pre and post, like as much as you can get information, because you really want to find what triggered the purchase. And sometimes it might be mundane, but you want to know what that mundane thing is if it's more on the consumer side, because that will help you probably come up with other hypotheses, other ways of experimenting on that, and try to identify, well, how can I identify that trigger? Maybe I need to ask that in the marketing or in a sales call, et cetera. Because if you know it's consistent, you're more likely to sell if you can identify it more quickly and figure out ways that, but I don't see a lot of folks spending a lot of time. That's one of the things I've found consistently. People who do better, they really dig into what was the trigger, really find out what it is, even if it's just like, oh, we just, you know, we had a hiring change, a new person. Doesn't matter. Then you might look for every time there's a new person. Wow, they're way easier to sell. They're not entrenched, but it's a trigger. You should always look for it. That's why I highlighted it. And then competitors sometimes just helps you figure out where you just will stand out more than anyone else. It could just be like, you might be selling something very similar, but just like, but no one's really competing over here. Start, you know, go there, get some revenue. Like, don't be too tied or wedded to your idea, you know, the customer you envision you selling to. Don't have too much ego in that unless you can quickly sell to those people. You know, look at how to differentiate yourself from any of your competitors. So you just want to get quicker sales in the initial stages. And then you can start getting more visionary and big dream, and then bigger, bigger ticket stuff, better team, bigger markets. Once you can show it, and you're basically building your self-confidence along the way. But you can use your competitors, do intelligence to just figure out what they're doing well. And especially if they're doing something well, but they're not targeting a certain segment, go after that. Steal what they're doing, but then go after a place that no one's going after. Anyways, it's very helpful also to just, you'll need to, especially if you do run in head to head, ideally it's just one or two instead of 3 or 4 or 5. You need to figure out how you're uniquely selling. And Ham can ask questions around that. We can give you some examples, like unique selling proposition versus unique value proposition. Everyone starts off with a unique value proposition, but as soon as you have competition, you have to be like, yeah, but we're better than them because of this. And it might be completely different than your unique value proposition. So that's the reason why you kind of get into competition. It's mostly to help you turn it into an advantage as much as you can, and try to figure out where you can compete. Ham, I think this is you.
Yep. So one of the things that you need to look at, again, you put your sales director hat on, and you think about, okay, what's the recipe that I need to be successful and to get to be scalable? So as Mitch said, he's already covered the value proposition, the product offering, and how you message that. So if it's attributes in terms of a B2C, you got to get really clear about the attributes. If you think about some brands that you use as a consumer, you think about your connection with those brands, there's a messaging that gets to you and it appeals to you, and that's why your response is. And then when you think about distribution, a lot of times founders want to run the e-commerce store, get on there, make noise, try to get people to adopt them. No. Find a company that already has distribution channels for the market you're pursuing and try to make a licensing deal with them or a distribution deal for a certain segment. And maybe it's just one niche segment, but that gets you revenue. And it doesn't cost you money to make that relationship happen. You're getting a percentage when they sell something. And so that's a very smart way to get to scale. It doesn't dilute your entire business. You can have one solution here and go over and sell 5 or 6 yourself, but it gives you revenue. Another thing is pricing. I see a lot of founders struggle with discounting. A lot of founders struggle with, well, how should I price this product based on this? No. You got to make and reverse that engineering around the product. What's your cost of sales? How much marketing and advertising you have to do if you're a B2C product? And then you work on the profit margin, you come up with a number. Then you justify that number, going back to what Mitch said, with the value proposition, the product offering, and the messaging. It's like when you see a commercial for BMW, and they don't go in through the thing about the engine or the tires or the rim or how good the leather smells in the seat. No, it's a driving experience that they sell you. You're behind the wheel of a BMW, and that experience is what you're buying. All the other attributes of that car is going to be explained later. But that's not what gets you motivated to go into a showroom and look at that BMW as an example. Then the other thing is you can find people that, because you're doing all this, a distributor might become a strategic investor because they see what you're doing, they like it. Potentially, they could even be an acquiring company. I've seen that happen a lot as well. So I just want to reemphasize that there are many ways to get to scale. It doesn't have to be you doing an e-commerce site, marketing that site if you're a B2C, or if you're a B2B, going to trade shows, putting up the stupid booth and trying to flag people off the floor. That doesn't work. All right. I had a team of salespeople at one company where I was head of sales. We did 30 trade shows a year. It was a science that we perfected. My sales reps, when they went to a trade show, usually 3 days, they had their complete agenda booked with meetings. They didn't even have time to look up to somebody walking down the aisle. They were completely booked because they spent 2 months searching, harvesting, and booking those appointments and qualifying those candidates when they got to the trade show. And those 30 trade shows ended up being a $115 million business segment for one of the biggest healthcare wellness companies, Everyday Health, like people like South Beach Diet, the late Suzanne.
Switch it back over to Ham.
Thanks, Mitch. One thing too, to kind of make the bridge where Mitch was with the product about why it's so important to understand how people use it. A lot of founders fall into the trap that a potential customer comes to them and said, well, if the product did this, I would buy it. Or if it came in this.
For more information and to watch our webinars in full, visit our website, innovatorsclubforwomen.org, and join as a member to build your startup for full success.